Welcome to Resilient. Hosted by Matthew Mingy, Resilient is a podcast about hope, transformation, and the redeeming power of God's love. Born out of Matthew's experience in jail ministry, the podcast shares inspiring stories of people who've overcome addiction, incarceration, and despair through Christ. Each episode features authentic conversations, powerful lessons, and practical encouragement, all delivered with a warm and approachable tone. The goal is to remind listeners that no one is beyond God's reach and to offer hope for a life of healing, purpose, and resilience. Listeners are invited to join the journey, share the message, and embrace God's grace no matter where they are in life. Today, I'm sitting down with Pastor Matt Thomas, a man whose journey embodies the very heart of resilience. From battling addiction at a young age, following the example set before him, to enduring tragic loss, serving in the military, stepping into fatherhood, and ultimately finding his calling in ministry. Matt's story is one of redemption and purpose. Now a husband and a leader, he's living proof that no past is beyond God's reach. Some part of his story will resonate with you, so stick around. You won't want to miss this conversation. Hey, Matt. Welcome to Resilient Podcast. Before we get into it, let's start with a few icebreaker questions. Are you ready?
Yep, I'm ready.
If you could give yourself one piece of advice before your struggles began, what would it be?
If I could give myself one piece of advice, it would be that I am loved and that people care about me and I am not alone.
Wow. I'm sure that's going to resonate with a lot of people.
Yeah.
Okay, number 2, what's one thing that always makes you laugh, no matter what?
Videos of people slipping or sliding or like it could be anything, anywhere. And because I'm clumsy and a lot of my kids are clumsy, so I think it's just one of those givens that anytime you see that, especially in music, it's pretty funny.
Okay, right? It's like you want to see the hilarious fail, but you want to make sure they're okay.
At the same time, it's like, I know it's not that bad. But yeah, so nothing like real serious, just real funny ones.
Awesome. Number 3, if you had to describe your journey in a movie title, what would that movie title be?
Ooh, that's a good one. Man, I would say Resilient.
Awesome. I had someone else say Mission Impossible.
Yeah. There was a point in my life where, yes, that was 100% it.
Oh, that's awesome. What's a small, everyday thing you now appreciate that you once took for granted?
I would say the time between when I wake up and my kids wake up, and then seeing them come downstairs and be able to just hug them and just love them. And so like my 10-year-old will come downstairs and he'll just like lay next to me and just put his head on me. And I it's the most special thing in the world.
That's awesome. I always call that the calm before the storm.
Yes. Also very true.
If you could have dinner with any biblical figure besides Jesus.
Oh man.
Who would it be?
Honestly, I would say it'd probably be Peter.
Okay, good. How come?
Well, because of his attitude and his bad decision-making skills, and on the same time, his absolute faith that nobody else in the boat had, and then to completely deny him. And so I just want to talk to him because I understand, and I can understand, obviously not completely because I wasn't there, but the ups and downs of like physically walking with Jesus and what that looks like. I'd love to hear about that.
Awesome. You can relate. Okay. 3 left. What's a song or Bible verse that carried you through your hardest days?
So in prison, there's an old Baptist song, and the chorus just repeats itself. Jesus is a rock in a weary land, a shelter in the time of storm. And when I would try to go to sleep at night in prison and my brain wouldn't stop working, that was what I used to be able to stop the anxiety roll in my brain, trying to go to sleep without drugs and everything, that really helped me be able to go to sleep.
Oh, that's good. I'm going to go back and write that down and take that into jail. I talk about finding a breath prayer that helps the men in jail so they can just control their breathing while they're praying. Yep. And that seems like a good one there. This is a fun one. What's a nickname you've had, and what's the story behind it?
Shaggy was the nickname.
Okay.
And when I was in the Navy, I showed up to my friend's dorm room in the barracks. So I was stationed on a submarine. We went up to Washington, to Bremerton, which is a sub-base dry dock thing. And my buddy Justin was stationed there. And I showed up to his room just lit up. I'm talking lit up. And my eyes were blazing red. And he had a shirt on that was shaggy. And it looked just like me. And he goes, "I'm going to give you the shirt." And so like forever, that just ended up becoming my nickname. And I ran around the streets with that nickname, and a lot of people didn't even know my real name.
Wow. Okay. So what age did you go into the Navy?
So I went in the Navy at 19.
And what was your job on the submarine?
I was a sonar technician on a submarine.
Okay. Last one here. If you had to sum up your testimony in one word, what would it be?
Supernatural.
Supernatural Matt Shaggy.
Yep.
Well, I have you on today because I love to share these stories when I meet someone or I see someone doing awesome things who has a past and Christ radically transformed their life. And I met you in Johnson County, Kansas at a church, at a jail ministry event. We both have the same name. I'm pretty sure we had the same color shirt on.
I think so.
And we could be twins. So I've definitely followed what you got going on, but I want to hear more and I want to be able to share that with everybody else.
Oh, that sounds good.
So I always love to go back to the beginning. So can you share a little bit about your background? I know we have the Navy there at 19, but such as where you grew up and your family life?
Yeah, so I moved all around as a kid. I was born in Albany, Oregon. Moved to Nevada when I was 4, and then moved to California when I was 10 or 11, and then got in trouble. I mean, I was getting in trouble through it, but I got in real trouble and got sent to a home for wayward boys, an independent Baptist boarding school. And I was there like all my teenage years. So right before I turned 16 to 18 and a half, I was in there, and my childhood was really rough. My mom was an alcoholic, and my dad was not in my life because he was a disaster and strung out on drugs and mean. And through that space, I was abused as a kid, sexually, physically, and my mom was real heavy into drinking, and so she was there, but she wasn't there, and so my life culminated from a young age into stealing and setting fires and just doing things that 7, 8, 9, 10-year-olds should never have to do or never do. And the outcome of that was, I became heavily addicted to methamphetamines about the time I was 13. And it was a mess. And so by the time I had gone to this boarding school place, I was a complete full-blown drug addict. I was using acid every other day when I could get it. I was smoking weed every day, and just a complete disaster in the punk rock music and that whole scene. And it was like, so I had taken on this persona of thrash metal, punk rock. I had a mohawk and the stoner with the boots.
You were living it, man.
Oh yeah, and I was out of control, and so. My mom sent me to this boarding school. I had to get, sedated and put in a van and taken out of state. And it was cool. That's where I met Jesus, because I didn't grow up in church. I didn't have a background for church. It was weird. Even in my mess, I knew there was a God. I just didn't quite understand who he was. And so I get to this boarding school. It's like, it's super strict rules, very shame culture, Jesus, the grace and love of Jesus is secondary to his damnation. And it was real crazy. But at least it showed me who Jesus was. And man, I got to complete high school while I was there. So I dropped out of high school the day before I got sent up there. And so I would have never graduated had I not gone there. And so, I ended up graduating high school. And while I was there, I tried to go to college, and I couldn't do it because I really didn't know what I was doing. And I was institutionalized, and I didn't even realize it, but I didn't know how to hold a job. I didn't know how to study. I just didn't. And so it wasn't too long before I was out of control again. And, like I said, I had been abused as a kid sexually, and it really messed my head up a lot. And that, coupled with drugs and undealt with trauma, it was a recipe for disaster. And so I met a girl. I was actually selling magazines door to door, which is, just here's if anybody tries to sell you a magazine, don't buy it.
Yeah, right.
You're not going to get it. But I met a girl, and we hooked up, and she got pregnant, and we left this magazine crew. And that's how I ended up joining the Navy. Was I didn't know how to hold a job or do anything. And so, it's institutional living, and I can do that. And so I joined the Navy, go to boot camp, become a sailor, become a submariner. And I'm doing phenomenal. I mean, I'm drinking too much, but it's better, it's better than doing a bunch of meth and drinking too much.
Right.
So I'm doing good though. I get assigned San Diego, which was cool because that means I got to go back home, at least close to home. And, we had a kid. I've got two older girls that are 27 and 25. And so I'm in the Navy, I'm doing good. And then, Satan is really good at what he does. And there just happened to be somebody in Navy housing who knew where to get speed, which is known as, meth now. And I got high. One day I came home and my wife was like, "Hey, you want to get high?" And I was like, "What do you mean high?" And she goes, "High." And I was like, "Yeah," because I was still a drug addict. I just wasn't getting high. And so I did. And then come to find out real crazily, my whole division in my sonar division on my submarine were all getting high also.
Oh,
and
wow.
So it was crazy. So I would go buy drugs in Tijuana, and I would come across the border and sell them. And it was, I did that for a while. And eventually my wife and I split up. Of course, there was drugs in our relationship, but she had some real huge mental health crisis, which turns out I did too. I just didn't realize it. But so we split up. I ended up getting out of the military with a custodial parent discharge, and which means that I got my full honorable discharge, all that. I just wouldn't be able to go back in the military unless I had a waiver signed for my kids. And unfortunately, I was completely strung out on drugs, and I made a disaster of my life. I moved up to Washington for about a year and did absolutely nothing up there except more drugs. And then my ex-wife, when we were still married, we were separated, showed back up in my life and was like, "Hey, I want to have a family again. I want to do this. Miss you." And I was like, absolutely. I was so tired and so brokenhearted and just wanted to be married again. And she okey doked me. She did. I got to Arizona. I had custody of my kids. And so I got to Arizona, and she took the kids and kicked me out. Oh, yeah, it was crazy. I ended up homeless in Mesa, Arizona, and ended up living with somebody that I worked with that was one of her friends. And so it just really started, the bigger decline.
How old were you at this time?
Man, this was 2001. So I would have been 24. Yeah, 23, 24. And, I tried to live and do good. And unfortunately, through a bunch of ugliness and addiction, man, I ended up getting to the point that I was robbing people and stealing stuff and selling drugs, and I'd hurt some people. And it was just a series of dominoes kept falling, lost my kids, Uh, and then my dad was killed in 2002. And it's actually in a book called The Toll of Meth out of California. And he lived in Lake Elsinore, and he was shooting drugs in the bathroom with somebody and some girl, and her boyfriend woke up and he beat my dad into a coma. And the police finally made it because one of the girls snuck out, but my dad died a week later in the hospital.
Wow.
And so like just all of that just really fed that I don't care stuff, and I was just out of control, and I was out of control till 2006. And I just kept, in and out of jail, in and out of jail, in and out of jail, warrants, more warrants, in and out of jail. And then so finally, I went to prison in 2006 for possession of paraphernalia. Let me see, it was possession of paraphernalia, burglary tools, burglary, theft of means of transportation, which was a stolen car. And then a year later, they took me back to court and charged me with possession of marijuana, which in Arizona was a felony, a class 6 felony or a class 1 misdemeanor. And of course, I didn't go to court, so I signed for the felony just so I can get back to prison. And so I did 3 years of prison. And in that space, even though I had been introduced to Jesus, God really got a hold of me. And like, so out here, I think you go to St. Joe's in Missouri for INDOC, right?
Yep.
So in Arizona, it's Alhambra. And so you go to Alhambra, and that's how they do your diagnostic and all that. So I get there, and I ran into a guy that was one of my drug dealers on the street, and he was heavily affiliated. And I'm talking like heavy duty affiliated. I said, hey man, I was young, I was stupid. I was like, hey, well, what do I got to do to be this? And I'll never forget it. He took me to the side and he goes, I'm gonna tell you something. He said, you need to do your time like a man, and you need to get out of prison and raise your kids. He said, this isn't what you think it is. It's not about your race, your people, he said, all that matters in here is who's got the drugs. They control the yard. He said, dude, just do the time and get out and stay out. And I was like, what? And here was a guy that was, had all the right markings, just all of it, all the tattoos, all the everything. And then he shook my hand and gave me a hug and said, hey, watch your nickname. There's another dude that's a smash on sight, which in other words, people just waiting to beat him. Love you, youngster. And he walked away. And I knew God had used that dude to forever change my life.
Wow.
It was crazy.
Man, okay. Well, let's get into the good stuff then, because obviously we're going somewhere. We're starting to talk about a transformation.
So I got to the prison yard, and I knew I had a Bible. And so I asked for a Bible, which made all the other white dudes mad because I wasn't all of that. And then I stuck my nose in a Bible and was like, man, I got to do something different. I started working in the kitchen, almost got into a fight because I wouldn't steal for somebody, because they told us certain rules that we go by. And part of that was if you're white, you don't steal, and you especially don't steal from other races and this and that. And so like somebody tried to hand me something in the kitchen, and I was like, nope. And I seriously almost ended up in a fight with this dude. And God really just kind of protected me. He was a big dude too. So it was like, I got to the closet to fight because it was in a mop closet. And the dude was like, man, I don't want to fight you. This was stupid. I'm sorry. And so it's just crazy how stuff like that happened. But the cooler part of getting to the yard was God used us to plant a church on that yard where 70 people were coming to church 3 times a week.
Wow. So this was inmate led.
Yep, all inmate led. And because our chaplain was kind of non-existent because it was a work camp out in the middle of nowhere. There was about 440 dudes at max capacity. And so like the chaplain had already retired, but he was just there so he could get a little extra. And so, he was a real good dude. He was a sweet guy, but he wasn't really plugged in.
Right.
And so we really dug in and we did this, and we had church service, prayer night. I preached my first sermon in prison, all that, and God really gave me a blueprint for the rest of my life of what we can actually accomplish inside of an institution.
What age were you when you first preached this first sermon?
I was 20, maybe 28.
Okay.
27, 28. Yeah, I was in my 20s, and God really opened that door, and I preached my first sermon, and we had a pop-in church, and I was doing wildland firefighting in Arizona at the time, which was super cool, and God really blessed. But while this was happening, my kids had been removed from their mom, and my mom ended up with custody. I had to sign my rights over to my mom as a parent, and come to find out later that their mom was really trying to hurt the girls. And so there was, that all happened in prison. And then I get out, and, I'm making it, but I'm struggling. All I want to do is be with a girl. And I walked out of church. I ended up relapsing with a bunch of prescription pills one time, and just not knowing how to live. And then later that year, my kid's mom, my first wife, ended up getting murdered out in Lyons, Kansas.
Oh my goodness.
By an ex-boyfriend, which, thank God thank God my girls weren't there when it happened.
Amen.
But so just a lot of hurt and a lot of crazy. But yeah, so then I moved to Wichita from Arizona right at the beginning of 2011. And dude, really started trying to just be a good dad to my kids, and trying to.
How do you pick Wichita from Arizona?
My mom lived in Wichita because she had custody of my daughters. I moved to Wichita because that's where my daughters were at. Because I knew I needed to be a dad to my kids, even though I didn't know what I was doing. And so moved out to Wichita. My fiance at the time, when I went to prison, moved out, and we ended up getting married, having 2 kids together. And through that process of all of that, we started Firm Foundations Ministries, which is the housing portion and leadership development. And I got involved with Mentoring for Success, and we ended up planting a couple churches in the Hutchinson prison in Kansas. And that's kind of how God did it. And then, unfortunately, after we did all this and I moved up here, and my wife at the time had left and decided she didn't want to be married anymore and didn't want to be a pastor's wife. And I ended up with custody of my 2 boys, Joshua and Hunter, which is super awesome. But it was, God's hand was on that too. And I eventually got remarried, and I now have a wife who's working on her doctorate in traumatology. Yeah, seriously.
You said in traumatology?
Yeah, she is. She's a licensed therapist, and she is the school counselor for St. Mary University in Leavenworth.
Wow, that's amazing.
And we have a blended family now, and it's really beautiful. And God has just restored these spaces that were absolutely broken, but it has definitely not been easy or without pain years.
Holy cow. So I love how you have found a spouse that can kind of read you with traumatology.
Oh, yeah.
That's pretty amazing. So what's your normal routine look like, or your day look like with Firm Foundations? I also see you're a part of Faith Alive Fellowship.
Yes. So I pastor. So I'm the lead pastor of Faith Alive Fellowship, meets in Kansas City, Kansas. It's super awesome. It's like the church is a beautiful mix of people that have never been in trouble, and then a lot of people who have been in trouble that God is using to change a lot of other people's lives. And so it's like the Jesus Revolution movie played out in real life.
Okay. Right, I love it.
Yes. And then so, with Firm Foundations, I oversee the whole thing because I helped found it. And really it's like, so Monday is my day off, and then Tuesday is pretty much admin, and then I come over here to the church and I sit in the church office and we do team meetings and stuff like that. And then like the flurry starts Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Wednesday is my Sabbath day where I spend that time with God during the day. And then I teach class Wednesday night at the church. But Thursday I'm in the prison, Friday I'm in the prison, and Saturday I'm in the prison, and sometimes Sunday in the prison. And we do leadership development, church leader training. We're really big on how do we empower these men to lead right where they are at. We're working towards this, but like, hey, yes, we're working towards this, but how do we get you healthy right now so you make the most impact right now? And
This
so
is Hutchinson Prison?
No, in Lansing right now. So
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm currently active in Lansing. Yeah. So we still got some people in Hutch, but I spend, usually 2 to 3 days a week in Lansing up here, teaching and leading these amazing brothers that are just killing it for Jesus inside.
Wow. So you go in with Firm Foundations Ministries.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And so do you also see like Brothers in Blue up there?
Yeah. No. So we're tied at the hip. So I was the program manager for Brothers in Blue for 3 years. That's what actually got me up here. And then, I felt God calling me away to do something different, which ended up being this church stuff and really digging into Firm Foundations. And so there's a lot of crossover. So we house a lot of guys from Brothers in Blue, but we also do leadership development with them. And then Brothers in Blue has hosted us. He helped us for years be able to get through. So it's a really beautiful relationship.
Wow. So these houses you're talking about, are those owned by Firm Foundations?
Yes, they are.
Okay, so I'll see posts you make. You have quite a reach where you're at there in Kansas. So you're in KCK right now, and you're going up to prison in Lansing, but you also have houses in Topeka and Wichita. Is that correct?
Yes, we do. Topeka and Wichita, and we have contacts in all of the prisons of Kansas because we're a housing place, and so we accept guys from Larned, from Hutchinson, from Norton, from all over the state, El Dorado, and all that. And then I'll actually go speak at El Dorado or Hutch or some of these other prisons too.
Well, I just thought, like, what did you want to do when you grow up? When you were a little kid, I'm hearing all these things you're doing now. What you want to do when you were little?
Hey, honestly, I never had dreams like that. By the time I was 12, I just wanted to be, all I ever wanted to be was a drug addict. I know that sounds horrible, but like I didn't like music, and drugs was my whole life, and that's all I ever wanted to do.
I hope people hear this portion of the podcast, if they hear nothing else, that at 12 you wanted to be a drug addict. Now you're you're a lead pastor of a church. You're going into prison 2 to 3 times a week teaching leadership, and you're also housing those coming out of prison. And all you wanted to do was to become a drug addict. This is transformation right here.
Yeah, like it's crazy. I remember, too, being a kid when I was really young and hating drugs. And I was so mad, because my dad was a drug addict. And my mom was, too, but she was more of an alcoholic. But, like, I'll never end up like you, and blah, you know what I mean? And then, like, literally 2 years later, all I ever wanted to do was just do drugs and listen to music, and that was good for the rest of my life. And then God had this radical change where, I love creating healthy leaders. Like, that is and I love pastoring my church. I love getting to feed the sheep that God has given me. And I would have never thought that in a million years.
So your past life, you had a lot of skills. Yeah. You transported drugs, you stole, you said you hurt some people, you did a lot of different things. Has God transformed any of those? And like today you're sitting back and you're like, these skills I used to use in a different way, but God has transformed them.
Every one of them. And this is my counterbalance. I try to tell people, like, all of the skills you had aren't by mistake. Like, there are some you learn through time and you get better at, but your naturally gifted abilities are a gift from God. We just use them for everything bad.
Amen.
So honestly, like, if I wasn't a drug addict, I would be a kingpin drug dealer. Like, I know that. I know that my speech skills, the way I can talk, the way I can read a room, all of these things that kept me alive in the middle of being stupid are all things that I use to help other people grow out of all of that pain and that brokenness. And so being able to communicate in a healthy way how I feel and what's going on, I'm able to use to teach these guys that, because I've had such a broken piece of my past where I wasn't able to say anything except, something angry or something sad. And now there's a whole gamut of emotions and feelings and things that I'm able to use, but also being able to read the room I'm talking to, whether it's in the prison, in the church, or in a business, and to, on the fly, shift how I speak to be able to accomplish what I'm trying to accomplish.
Man, that's beautiful. I don't think I know your wife's going to school, getting her doctorate, and she's got a lot of formal education, but you've picked up a lot of education in different ways that seems to be benefiting a lot of people.
Yeah. And it's funny because my wife would be like, "You are so smart." It's kind of like shocking to her. Like, I'm a high school graduate, and that's about it. But really, through the lifestyle and through the streets, if you pay attention, there's knowledge everywhere to glean, and if you don't, it eats your lunch. So you learn, or you don't, and it's really extra painful.
That's true. I said this in my last podcast interview, but I think it applies to you very much. You want your repentance to be as notorious as your rebellion, and your repentance here, your new life, is bigger, I feel like, than anything in your past life.
No, I would totally agree. Number one, I would have never thought I'd be a pastor. But number two, I never thought like some drug addict kid from the West Coast is now in the Midwest and working with people in Colorado and California, and you know what I'm saying, and these different areas that it's just a trip. Or even just in the prison system. Like I never wanted to go back to prison. Like that was not on my bingo card for life. Like, hey, you're going to now go back into prison and take Jesus with you. Like that was not in the card, so to speak. But Jesus really wrecked and changed everything about me, and it was just such a burden that it needed to happen. So yeah.
Wow. I think I'm going to start asking people more often, as a kid, what did they want to be when they grow up? Because you kind of brought that to light, that I had dreams for what I wanted to be now, and it never would have been going into jail, being able to speak to those that have been incarcerated and addicted. And I feel like if we open up our hands and we walk forward in obedience, then God will use us. But so many people say that God doesn't speak to them, God's not moving in their life, and maybe their posture's not correct to accept. And I love it. In the Bible, it speaks about these things, that Jesus didn't come for those that are well, but he came for those that are sick. Those that are well already have a preconceived notion that they don't need anything. And he speaks to us when we're broken so often. And I love it because you accepted that. You had your hands open in obedience and submission. And now you have such a reach in helping so many others that a lot of the guys that you're probably speaking to didn't have dads, just like you didn't.
Yeah. I would say the majority.
So in Lansing Prison, do they have the Good Dads program going on?
They do.
Okay, good. I know a little bit about it, but I have such a passion for building up dads as well, just because I talk to all these folks and they didn't have a strong father figure in their life, and it's affected them, and then it affects their children. Then we have these generational curses happening. I was fortunate. I had a fantastic father in my life, but I never really accepted. I almost thought of my dad as too good to where I didn't need a heavenly father.
Yeah.
And so I had to get to my own broken space to figure out that I needed something even more than what my dad could provide. Hey, I don't have any regrets, and I know you don't either because of where you are today. So moving forward, what is a piece of advice, a message that you could leave this audience with just about resilience, faith, or transformation?
Well, I'm I'm going to throw you a curveball. My piece of advice is be teachable. Your resiliency only goes far enough as you are willing to let somebody guide you. There are a lot of resilient people that make it through a lot of things, but then absolutely limit the growth that they have by not being teachable.
That's amazing. We just started talking in Cass County Jail about strong convictions and holding them loosely, because I love what you're saying. Be teachable, but if we're so by the book, black and white, and you're not allowing someone else to change your perspective or show you a correct way. I learned so much by the men I talked to in jail. And a lot of people may say like, hey, they don't know anything. They're sitting in jail.
I know a lot.
Exactly. And so I was not teachable. My parents will attest to this. As I was growing up, I knew everything. So who can teach me anything? And God has given me that spirit of, I just want smarter people around me. I can learn something from everybody.
Yeah, that's the best way to do it in the world.
Dude, where can people come to your church? How can they follow you? How can they get involved in your mission?
Yeah, so my church meets at 4830 Shawnee Drive in KCK, and its services are at 10 on Sunday, Bible study Tuesday night at 7. And dude, like really, I'm taking a social media fast for Lent. But I'm on Facebook and all the stuff too under Matt Thomas.
Awesome. And so sometimes you have some events too for Firm Foundations and also sometimes you're calling out for folks to get involved to help support these houses with items.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So, and that's at Firm Foundation Ministries on Facebook, right?
Yep, firmfoundationsministries.org, and there's an Amazon place if you want to, or if you want, like honestly, financial donations are always helpful because as you know, it is not, you run a nonprofit. It's not like it's literally a nonprofit for a reason.
Right.
And but we can always use help, but no, just getting involved and being able to share the story like this is a blessing all in itself.
Dude, I hope this message just gets out here about where your life was, and not through your own strength, but through Christ working in your life. You have such a web, an outreach, a catalyst going on with everything you're touching right now. I'm very humbled that I get to talk to another Matt. Thank you, and tell you that I am very honored that you came on here today with me.
I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you, sir. I really do, for real.
Wow, what an incredible conversation with Pastor Matt. His journey is a powerful reminder that no matter where you've been, God can rewrite your story. If this episode encouraged you, take a moment to share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode of Resilient. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, stay strong, stay faithful, and keep moving forward.